Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am delighted to be joined by the fabulous Lawrence Trist. Lawrence is the Managing Director of Finsbury Food Group Cake Division. He's had a wealth of expertise, not only within food, FMCG, retail, but he's also run his own business as well previously, prior to becoming MD here at Finsbury. Lawrence is also on the DAR Global Advisory Board, and I've had the privilege of knowing him for a number of years, and so it's really fantastic to have him here on the show today, so he can share with all of our listeners a little bit about how he came to be where he is today and why he's so passionate about diversity, inclusion and belonging. Welcome to the show, Lawrence.
Hi, Leila.
Hi. Thanks so much for joining us today, especially during these unprecedented times.
Indeed, which is why you've got a backdrop of my house behind you as opposed to my office that I would normally be in.
I know, well, it looks lovely. And I have to say, I do very, very much enjoy not only doing video calls, but also conferences where you have the opportunity to almost get this window into the personal life of whoever it is that you're speaking to. So yeah, and I guess these lines between business and personal are getting a bit more blurred, but I'm quite nosy, so I always like to see what's going on.
I'm always rather self-conscious about making sure I haven't got anything in the background. So, you'll see videos of me with white backgrounds all the time. So anyway,
you have some. And for those who are listening on audio here, Lawrence has got a really lovely, very large room actually that he's sitting in. Some very, very nice kind of wooden beams. So it looks lovely. Anyway, Lawrence. But getting back to, I guess, what is important. I wonder for those that don't know you as well as I do personally, I wonder whether you could just explain to our listeners a little bit about you and how you came to be where you are today, a bit about the background and even some of the current projects that you're working on right now.
Yeah, okay. I suppose how I came to be managing director of a cake business is probably similar to lots of people in terms of their career paths. You set out with great ambitions and great ideas for how your career is going to take place, potentially from a very young age. And then it just takes its own path, and it's all about making decisions as you go along. So if I kind of start where I started, I recognized when I was very young that I was an average student. I was average at sports, average at education, but realized I needed something in my life to make me stand out from the crowd. And because unfortunately I didn't have a God-given talent to be a fantastic footballer or a brilliant voice or a great musician, I recognized that my way of standing out was to get myself fully educated in order to be successful in business, which is the area I wanted to go into. So I went off and did my O-levels, A-levels, and did a degree. And then at the end of my degree, I had this great ambition, a great thoughts that I would stand there fully educated and then go, right, what am I going to do to conquer the world? Unfortunately, what actually transpired was as I got to the end of my degree, Spiller's Pet Foods, who I did a placement with, rang me up and said, right, you've done a placement with us, you've done an interview, would you like a job? I looked at my bank account, realised there was nothing in it. I looked at Spiller's Pet Foods and thought, you're in London, which is where I'd like to go. I was studying in Manchester at the time. And that is exactly how I got into food or into the kind of current FMCG marketplace, because I kind of saw that opportunity and took it on. Since then, I've kind of navigated my way through a very commercial background to start with. I did category management, did commercial. I then popped off and worked with British Airways and did some partnership work with them, which was simply I bought for them. So if you go on a British Airways flight, you get lots of freebies as you go on it, whether they're wash bags or sleeper suits or nuts. All I did was I went to the manufacturers and said, right, this is a great opportunity to communicate to British Airways users. I'm going to pay you a little bit for it, but I'm not going to pay you enough. So it's going to be a marketing and a sales opportunity, so product placement. So did that. I went to set my own business up with development gyms for children, which we can go on for hours, but I won't take it aside. But then realised my passion has always been working within FMCG. I love the industry. It is what it says. It's a fast-moving industry. It's competitive. We've got some great customers we face into, So I've always enjoyed myself in there. So I went to Allied Bakeries, worked there, went through a number of different roles from category management, sales, and that was great. Spent 6-7 years there. And then through my network, actually, I ended up at Finsbury Foods. I knew the deputy chairman of the company, and it needed someone to come in as an interim sales director to come in to turn it around a little bit in terms of the relationship with sales. We weren't too popular with our customers at that point, and there was lots of other areas that needed improving. And so I joined as the interim sales director. Now, that was 10 years ago. What Finsbury has done has offered me a fantastic career, been part of a great turnaround of a company to the point where we are today, albeit with a bit of a blip with the current situation. And I've had various roles from sales director, commercial director, and now fortunate to have the benefit of being the MD looking after the whole of the cake division. So, which is great. And, it's a privilege to do it as well as quite fun, actually. I like the leadership challenges that being a managing director offer.
Fantastic. And I love the way that you described that you almost kind of fell into this industry quite serendipitously, and you weren't necessarily as a young Lawrence kind of dreaming of being MD of a cake business, but clearly through hard work and networking, the determination have got to where you are right now. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to ask how you are coping personally and professionally, being ultimately at the helm of a big organization at the forefront of a pandemic, which is ultimately requiring a whole number of different key workers from different areas, be it health, and in particular areas like food are being massively affected. So wonder whether you could talk me through the experience that you've had at present.
The real key of leadership is to be able to lead through all the different environments, to lead through the good days and the bad days and keep the same sort of approach to it. And that's what I've managed to do, and that's what I will maintain. For me, there's a thin line between kind of confidence and arrogance and positivity and naivety. And it's important to retain that balance between retaining positivity, not becoming naive. And what I mean by that is, this, I think I've already touched upon it, is a blip. And, whether or not people will take offense at the terminology and the interpretation as a blip, this is a point in time. We're here for the long term. Businesses are here for the long term. We will have to find ways to recover. This is a sad situation in terms of people's welfare, and a sad situation in terms of the economy. But we have to recover and we have to come out of it. So I suppose, for me, there was a kind of a few stages that we've had to go through. So firstly, the first stage is the short-term stage, which is when the virus first started affecting businesses. And what I mean about the short-term stage, that was all about, following the welfare of our employees, that being number one, and then the welfare of our business. And that was all about making sure the right communication was there, making sure the understanding of the guidelines, creating principles of what we do. And one of the principles is we decided right from the outset we'd follow government guidelines. So we communicated that out. It's all about reassurance of all your colleagues around you. It's just scary times, both again from a health perspective and from a financial perspective. And this was our aim of the communication, was to reassure everybody of what they needed to do and what we were doing to make sure they were in the right place and protecting their livelihoods and their welfare. And we did that, and we followed, and we put in lots of different actions such as social distancing all around our bakeries. And we took very much at the start, the importance of our role in feeding the nation. The food supply chain is absolutely essential at this time. So whilst all businesses are operating to varying degrees, it's essential that food operates and continues to feed the nation, whether in lockdown or in free movement. And that is all aspects of food, so from your sausages to your tin beans, and cake has a role within that. We're there, our purpose is baking brilliance every day to make life special. And we need to retain that. We're all having a pretty damnly bad time. We still celebrate people's birthdays. We still celebrate milestones. We still want a treat. we still want something positive in our lives, and that is our role. So it was all about making sure that that communication, people's welfare, why we're in business, and retaining our business, so that we're here to be just as strong when we recover from this. And yes, albeit, you know, the commentators are saying how long it takes to recover as a country, as a world. You know, I have my own opinions. Let's not sort of stray into all those at the moment, but we will recover. You know, the world, this country has recovered from lots of different things, and we will recover.
Mhm. I love the positive mindset that you have with that, Lawrence. And, you know, I completely concur. I think, I mean, they're even saying, aren't they, health advice, don't watch too much news. And you think, well, that kind of says it in a nutshell, doesn't it? Because generally speaking, no offense to anyone who is from news or broadcasting who's listening in today, but the news does generally report bad things. And so we have to be positive. And I mean, let's face it, the world would be a much sadder place if there was not cake in it. I,
Yeah.
for one, would be devastated. And
Yeah.
so, thank goodness we have got health in hopefully, you know, as much as we can with government guidelines and staying at home and things like that. But also, we are lucky in the sense that this is not actually as bad as the war and other things that people are comparing it to. I see the similarities, but also we are in a situation where we can get great food and great drink, and we can do that in the UK. And so you're right, we must be positive. We must look at the silver linings of the clouds, because we will come out of this stronger by sticking together.
And I think it's important to retain positive, but I come back to my thin line or line between positivity and naivety. So it's important not to be naive. It's important to be positive, you know, especially as a leader. I think, you know, as a leader, if I'm hunkered down in the corner in the fetal position crying, then it's not exactly going to be a good leadership message to the rest of my colleagues who are looking to me for some sort of guidance and leadership. So it's important that I retain that. And I don't think we should be dismissing the severity of what's going on. I really don't, you know, and it's important to recognize it's not something that is you know, something with flu-like symptoms or something which won't affect people. It is, and it's horrific the way it is, but we do need to keep going. And unfortunately, you're right, you touched upon the media there. Again, my opinion, the media in this country are tend to work towards the negativity, towards sensationalism. If I look at it into their eyes, I can understand potentially why they're doing it, because they need to sell space, they need to sell papers, they need to sell advertising space, and so they need to create stories which in modern environment are kind of clicking through, clickbait. So I do understand that. I suppose what upsets me slightly in all this is when they haven't got the facts, and then they are trying to be negative about the way, say, the government are reacting to the situation. The government are trying their best in a really bad situation. They've painted themselves slightly into a corner in terms of that balance between welfare of human beings and the economy. But quite frankly, they haven't got a book they can pick up to go, oh, that's how we do this, because we've never done it before. You know, whether it's the government or it's us in business, we've not done this before. So we'll all make decisions, and that's leadership. And you know, we've got to hope that most of those decisions are right, but some won't be. But don't shoot us over the bad ones. Just help us to redo it. Every plan is perfect on the day you think of it. It's not so perfect once you start doing it. That's when you discover it. It's all about, as you've done, pivot to your business.
Absolutely. And I love your candid honesty about that, Lawrence, which is one of the things that I love so much actually about having chats with you about, you know, ultimately the good, the bad and the ugly, and trying our absolute best, because it's an attitude piece, isn't it? I think having the humility to say, look, you know, we don't know the answer to absolutely everything, but we've got the right attitude to make this work is absolutely key. So I wonder whether we can talk around that a little bit, because I know that you are a massive fan of having the right attitude when it comes to leadership, but also being, you know, as open and honest as you possibly can be, whilst kind of remaining as positive as you can, which I think actually is a very difficult thing sometimes for a leader, because as you said just a moment ago, you know, hunkering down in the fetal position and crying one's eyes out is not necessarily the way to inspire confidence in the team. Yeah, Crying over cake, no, definitely not. And in the fetal position, that does make me chuckle. But I think, there's also that balance, like you say, you want people to buy into the leaders, and you want people to really kind of go along the journey with you, and getting the balance between having the confidence but also being open and honest enough that people say, look, she is willing to kind of get down in the trenches with us and chat about it, or quite happily openly confess, look, I'm only human. We are doing our best here.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think it is, and you talk about the leadership through this environment. If you've spoken to me 4 or 5 weeks ago, my approach for leadership through this was exactly as I've talked to you about. But in terms of my physical position, it was about making sure that I was visible. So I was going to make sure that I would be visible, because a lot of, or the majority of our colleagues in cake have to come into work every day because they make the cake. They come into the bakery. So if they didn't come into work each day, we wouldn't get cake out the door. However, as we've gone into a more of a lockdown position, and I don't have that ability to travel around the bakeries, and actually for the welfare of my own family, who wouldn't like to see me coming out each day and then coming back, potentially bringing something back with me. I've had to adapt my leadership style to being visible through things like videos, and through lots of telephone conversations, and through briefings. We use a system called Workplace, which is a great communication tool developed by Facebook for businesses, that enables us to communicate to lots of people within our business. But the whole piece of leadership there comes back to the attitude. So it does draw back to the point you just made about attitude is key. For me, 80% of any individual in both a business and a personal environment is about attitude. And what I mean by that is that's the first thing I look at in anybody, because it's, the rest of our kind of experience, our ability in certain areas can be taught. Now, depending on how old you are, when you're a kid, a lot more can be taught. And when you're young in your career, you're probably more employed because you're the young, malleable person that someone could take into it. It's lots of attitude. And as you get further on in your career, yes, of course, experience is what people are employed for. But if I start with attitude is where I employ people. I look at their attitude towards thought, their attitude towards experience, their attitude towards approach. Because I think that kind of diversity of attitude creates strong teams, and strong teams are what creates success. And it's not me who made up the sayings that you're only as strong as your weakest member. By having a team, you have that diversity of thought, attitude, experience, and it means you can cover lots of different areas, whereas potentially as an individual you have a very singular view which you've learned over the period of time, and you can't learn everything. So having that group of people with the right attitude, I think, is a fantastic thing to have.
Absolutely. And how can we cultivate a plethora of different yet positive diversities of attitudes when it comes to teams? Because I think, we talk about diversity and inclusion and belonging, and really diversity, inclusion, belonging, it does relate to absolutely everyone. I think there's a lot of board members that I still speak to today who say, well, diversity and inclusion, how much is that related to me? And it's like, oh my goodness, diversity and inclusion, belonging, and I know that you know this, Lawrence, is related to everyone, because actually there's so many different things that make up a human being, whether it be mindset, diversity of experience, whether it be some of the classics that we often instantaneously think about: race, gender, religion, etc., etc. But actually, it is ultimately that diversity of thought and diversity experience that we are after. And there are both invisible diversities and also visible diversities, and of course it's important to have both, but to have as many different mindsets around the table is absolutely imperative to successful business, and I guess continuing on with innovation as well, because otherwise it's just a groupthink situation, is it not?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I suppose, so the way I practice diversity is from an attitudinal perspective, and where that then falls out in terms of, gender, race, etc., it falls out. So the first thing I look for is, so for instance, my first interview with anyone will be over a cup of coffee and a chat. I'll make a wrong or right assumption at that point that the reason they've been put in front of me, potentially by a recruitment company, is because they do have the relevant experience and ability. So they wouldn't put someone in front of me to be a supply chain director who's never met a supply chain in their life. So I'm kind of going with that assumption. And the first thing I look at is, would they fit in terms of attitudinal and thought with the board team? Would they fit into it? Would they enhance it? Would they add value to it? So that we actually have a diverse group in that sense. From that, I think, part of their attitude is their approach to life, and inclusivity is for me is the right approach. Someone has the right kind of moral fiber, if you want to determine it like that, just has the right mindset that they look to include themselves in what we're doing, but they look to also treat others with the same level of respect and include them. So that leads to that kind of inclusivity. And the belonging part comes from the fact that if you have a strong team with a right attitude and inclusive attitude, you feel part of that team. Suddenly you start to belong. And when you start to get success, you suddenly feel part of it. And anyone who's ever been part of a successful team will tell you how wonderful that feels. And if you think through life, we're all simple human beings. We want affirmation. All we crave for is affirmation. And people argue that we crave for negative and positive, because actually the key thing in life for us is we always want to be recognized. We don't want to just be this kind of faceless individual. But let's concentrate on positive affirmation. We all love a bit of praise, don't we? We all like to be told we're doing a good job. Again, if you have the people with the right diversity of attitude, feel they belong, that breeds success, and then that will give the right level of positivity there, and the positive affirmation.
You make some really good points there, Lawrence. And, first of all, what I think you're essentially saying when it comes to having this diversity of attitude is not actually being scared to hire people that might challenge what you are saying. Ultimately, if you have people who've got that different mindset who do, I guess fit in terms of attitude, because I think it's, it is very important, but it's also something which is quite difficult sometimes to quantify in terms of attitude, having different positive attitudes around the table. Yes, okay, that's definitely great. But also when you sit down and have a cup of coffee with someone, and providing loosely the skill set is there, it's very much about the person. Does that person challenge positively? Would they bring in another thought or another direction when it comes to being in a mixture of individuals, whether it be at a boardroom table or whether it be within a certain division, say? But to your second point about belonging, I think that is absolutely spot on. Every single human being on the planet has a physiological, in their blood, in their DNA, requirement to fit in some form or another, whether that is personally or professionally. And you're right to have that affirmation that what you're doing is okay and it's right. And I think we all probably have a time in our lives where we felt that we've not fitted in, or even if it's been in our childhood, say, where we felt everyone else is doing something else, or it's whatever I'm thinking here it's not cool, and you kind of feel, well, you don't belong, and there's nothing more uncomfortable than that feeling. And so surely that is not going to bode productivity. Making people feel they belong is absolutely critical to life, isn't it? As well as productivity in the workplace.
And you learn as you go along that feeling of belonging. You're right. You do have that feeling of not belonging. Should I follow this trend? Should I follow that? It's interesting. I've got 3 relatively young children, and my oldest one, who's a 13-year-old, she's finding that out now. She's trying to conform. I'm trying to encourage her to be an individual, but she's worried about what that will mean if she steps out from the norm. So she doesn't want to be in the limelight. I'm trying to encourage her to be in the limelight. But it's the same with all of us. And the beauty of life is that we're all individuals, and the fact that everybody isn't massively ambitious, that's okay. life isn't all about, always wanting to get to the top. Again, the diversity has to be some who want to get to the top, some who are happy to stay where they are. But the positive thing comes back, or the thing comes back to the attitude. So I don't mind where someone wants to be, as long as they've got the attitude to succeed in the area that they've decided they want to sit. So, for instance, my leadership team that I work with at the moment have a fantastic can-do attitude, have a fantastic level of ownership for their functions, and the level of challenge within the values that we adhere to at Finsbury is fantastic. Again, they talk to each other, they challenge each other, they support each other. But by doing that, we get lots of debate about the right things to do. And then we come to a position where we're actually taking the business forward. We're working well as a team. Mm-hmm. But a long time at work, if you don't enjoy it, and you don't like the people you're working with, and you don't enjoy the challenge, the opinion, the debate, it's a pretty miserable place to be.
Absolutely. And debate is healthy as well. I think sometimes people forget that when people almost talk about this kind of idealistic, out of the pages of some business book way to lead, it all seems very linear and very perfect. In reality, leadership is about disagreement. It is about, it's like any relationship. Any relationship has its ups and its downs, and no one ever agrees all the time, because if they did, one, it wouldn't be any fun, and two, it wouldn't bode, the absolute best ideas that can come out of the other end. And, I love that story about your daughter as well. And I think, those that are listening in, who are parents and who also aren't parents as well, and can definitely relate to that, whether it be when they were growing up. And I was thinking about myself, actually, when you were talking about your daughter, thinking, oh God, I remember that time, and I would not go back for a million years back to that time. Because it's blooming tough. Or those that have got teenage children, and you kind of, you're almost seeing yourself from many years ago, trying to fit in and trying to, be this chameleon that is the same color as everyone else, because God forbid you don't want to stand out. And just one quick question that I have before we go into the lightning round, which you know what is coming, so I know that you listen to the podcast, so we're going to the lightning round very, very soon. But I just wondered whether I could get one more question in, and I guess that is around your career and maybe some of the challenges that you have been through. Because I think when you describe your career, and for those listening in thinking, wow, that's a great linear path. I look at your profile and the work you've done, and it's fantastic. Every couple of years you're moving up. That's great. A lot of people's careers I see look like that. But what people don't often talk about is some of the challenges they had along the path of their career, or whether they, I don't know, perhaps remember those times where they were different and they really had to put their head above the parapet in order to be different, to get ahead. I think it's it is hard to get up to MD and CEO level if you want to. I know that you said there's many people who don't want to, and that is fine. But for those who do want to get there, what kind of advice could we glean, and how have you overcome certain obstacles? What's been challenging to you, Lawrence?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing, and it will be other people who will tell me whether or not this was the case, was very much like if I go back to my childhood and realizing I didn't have these great talents in any specific area, therefore education was important to me. I needed to get educated. Was the kind of the next stage of it for me was, again, because I didn't have this using gravitas in terms of this skill, I had to create my own, what I would term as gravitas, which was, how do I stand out from other people? And the way I stood out from other people was I also recognized, from my kind of moral and attitudinal background, I wasn't going to just stab everybody in the back and climb all over them to be successful. I knew I wanted to be successful and climb up organizations. But what I did was I simply worked potentially a little bit harder. If I recognized everyone was coming in at 8:30, I came in at 8 o'clock. If I recognized everyone was leaving at 6, I left at 6:30. When it came to volunteering to simple things like, on a course, when you had to get together, do a presentation, I'd always volunteer first. Whenever I go to any conference, and now people can watch out for that if they see me again, I always sit at the front. It's not because I'm a naughty boy, it's because I'll be the first person to be able to stand up, go and talk to the people who are running those conferences, or, being, in our case, retailers a lot of time, stick my hand out and say, hello, my name's Lawrence. What I realized very early on was that we're all human beings. Doesn't matter if someone is the chief executive of Sainsbury's, Tesco's, or whatever, they're human beings. If you walk up to them, stick your hand out and go, hello, my name is, they will stick their hand out back and go, hello, my name is so-and-so. They won't look at you and go, how dare you come and speak to me, because they're human beings. Mm-hmm. So recognize I need to stand out, have that little bit of confidence, be first in what I was trying to do. And, remaining positive. I will sometimes get the comment thrown at me that I'm a very optimistic, but I set myself up a very simple little task and game from a very early age, that if I ever came across a negative situation, I would immediately try and turn it into a positive. And that's always been my way of going about things. So if someone comes to me with a problem, I'll use the usual techniques of discussing with them for them to find a solution, or I'll try and be more positive about it and find the positives. And that actually stems back from, I'll let you into a little secret here. It stems back to my childhood. My mother was registered blind. Because of that, she wasn't always confident in everything, and she was a bit pessimistic. And I found that pessimism, I love my mum to bits, by the way, but I found that pessimism slightly annoying. And I vowed very early on that I wouldn't be pessimistic. I would always look for the positive in everything I do. And then the last thing, in terms of you asked, how do you overcome things? Again, keep that positivity. You have a problem comes up in your life, and we do have these things, personal and business-wise. You come to a bit of a cul-de-sac. The key thing is to stop, reflect on it, work out what's gone wrong, work out how you can reverse out that cul-de-sac and come back. And the example for me, and I won't talk about how many times it's happened, but let's say it has happened. I've realized at points in my career that I got to them and I thought, actually, I don't like being here. This isn't where I wanted to go. Whether or not I was in one job, I was a little bit bored because I didn't have enough to do. So instead of going, oh no, what am I going to do? I went, right, what's the problem? How am I going to reverse out of it? And sometimes you have to take a step back to take a step forward. So when I joined Allied Bakeries, I probably took a step back in terms of where I thought I'd be in my career. I definitely took a step back in terms of the money I was earning. But actually, I then set myself out with a positive attitude and said, right, let's get back to where I suspected I should have been. And I use the word suspect because nothing's ever guaranteed. And let's work hard to get there. And that's what we did. So, not every hurdle is insurmountable. You can find ways around it.
Lawrence, that's some absolutely fantastic advice there. And I loved it when you were talking about, not necessarily being the smartest, tallest, brightest, whatever. Classic you being very modest, which I think is really, really, really lovely, but always being the first or indeed last. I remember you telling me this, I think one of the first times I met you many, many, many years ago. Oh my God, ages ago. And you said, I'm always the last one at the bar at the end of the night. And I was like, oh, and why? And you were like, because I believe, or you never know when an opportunity could be there, and you were really positive about it. Not because I'm sure you'd had a couple of beers and such like, but actually being there at the right place, the right time. You never know what opportunity can be just around the corner. And there's a lot as well to be said about working harder, not necessarily being, and again, I'm not saying that you're not the smartest here at all. I think you've had a fabulous career, but I always say about myself, as I know that I'm not the smartest, but at least I know that I can outwork other people, which is exactly what you'd essentially said. And whilst it sounds very, very simple, actually there's there's less people than you would think that are willing to put in the extra half an hour here, half an hour there. When you add it all up, it's actually a huge amount. So thank you very much for sharing.
You go to actually, and I refer to the fact of me sitting in front of conferences. What always gets me, and I know a few other people I've spoken to who also all at the front of all these conferences, is that your company has paid for, I don't know, say 1,000 of you to go and listen to what's going on in the retail space that you're operating in and you're making your money out of. Customers are fantastic because they give us cash. And you're going to listen to what these guys are, and you have the perfect opportunity, as I say, to go up to them, talk to them, network with them, find out a little bit more. Yet the majority of the room, as soon as the coffee breaks and the lunch breaks start, stands up and walks towards the exit. Why are they doing that? It's astounding. But interesting that they've now coined a phrase of why I stay at the bar until the end, which is the FOMO thing. So
Yeah.
it's been diagnosed of what it is.
Oh.
I am thinking that one day something really exciting can happen.
Lawrence, for everyone who doesn't know what FOMO means, tell us all what it means before I ask you one lightning round question, because otherwise you and I will be here forever talking.
It was the fear of missing out, isn't it? You know, you're missing, the fear of missing out on something. And I've had that fear all my life. So far, I'm not sure that that big opportunity has been put in front of me. But what I can say, though, is I've had some fantastic nights out with lots of fantastic people across the grocery industry, both in my business and others. And the one thing I really enjoy about life is meeting individuals. What I think is important about life is being able to tell a story. You know, you want to be that to me demonstrates someone who's living a full life, that they have kind of good anecdotes. And I've met some people with some great anecdotes.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. And before we run out of time, I'm going to ask you one lightning round question, because otherwise we'll be on the world's longest podcast, which is not a problem, but there's been some fantastic.
You can edit it.
Pardon?
You can edit this.
No. You've got to get everything in there. It's all been real, and actually, I think it's been fantastic speaking with you today. But my question here for you is, my last question of today is, if you were to go back and to be able to give yourself, the young Lawrence, advice as you're about to take that first job at the pet food organization, what advice would you give to yourself, or indeed anyone else who doesn't know at the age that you were then what they're setting out to achieve?
Yeah, I would probably say grab every opportunity that comes along. If you're nervous that you don't know how to do whatever's being offered to you, but it sounds like a great opportunity, grab it, and we can work out later how you actually do the job or do the activity. And network. And what I mean by network is just get out there, be out there. No opportunity will come along to you if you're sat at home on your couch watching TV or whatever you might do. The only way you'll ever have an opportunity is being out there and being offered that chance to succeed. So just grab it with both hands. You only get one chance to do it. So get on and enjoy it.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. It's been a joy having you here today.
All right, no problem at all. See you later.
See, well, before you go, actually, as I always do, a very brief summary. I think what's ringing out loud and clear from today, just by way of summary and nuggets of wisdom, is this eternal optimism. I think no matter what happens to you, Lawrence, or the things that you say and radiate out, are this absolute impermeable kind of optimism, which I think is something that absolutely everyone can learn from. Every single diverse and inclusive leader out there in the world can learn from. Not only are we going through a difficult time at the moment, it's so incredibly important to stick together, to communicate, and to really lean on the power of our network. As you quite rightly said, Lawrence, people don't necessarily come to you with opportunities, but opportunities create themselves if you put yourself in the right place. Those that work hard genuinely and are willing to put in sometimes the extra miles are the ones who often do come out on top. And again, I think when it comes to leadership and attitudinal shifts that you were talking about, making sure that you really do embrace not only confidence, but I think also humility, to say that actually, if you don't know everything, then that's okay. I think leaders of the future are the ones that do take their employees on the journey, and taking employees on a journey means those individuals being able to relate to that individual. And I do very much hope that the archetypal leader of yesteryear, who's beating their hands on their chest saying that they are perfect, is really soon near gone, because leaders of the future need to embrace their humanity, need to embrace positive attitudes from all different places, ages, genders, religion, etc. And sometimes just being humble, being open, being honest about the fact that things can be tough, but you know what, we'll do it together, is what this world needs. And the world definitely needs cake as well. So thank you very, very much again, Lawrence. You've been fantastic. As always, you can tune in on demand to the podcast show, Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. We're actually here with you twice a week to make sure we're supporting you during times of difficulty, during this unprecedented unprecedented time. My name is Leila McKenzie-Dellis, and you've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show with Lawrence Trist. You can visit us at www.dialglobal.org/podcast. And if you missed anything from today's show or you wanted to make notes, they will all be in the show notes at the end of today's show. So don't worry about that at all. In the meantime, stay safe, and we will look forward to seeing you very soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.